A poor candidate experience is destroying your consumer brand, or at least that's what the employer branding experts would like you to think. Obviously, there's lots of variables that go into calculating the impact that a poor candidate experience may or may not have further along on the engagement chain with a specific consumer brand. Logically, though, it does make sense. I mean, if this company just rejected you as a candidate, why would you want to go buy their product or service, especially if the experience was, let's just say, less than professional? But is there any evidence that can tie the two experiences together? We're going to be discussing all that and more right now. If only there was a company that offered to survey candidates that went through your company's hiring experience so you can find out what actually happened. Luckily, today's guest is from thetalentboard.org. The Talent Board is a nonprofit organization focused on the evaluation and promotion of quality candidate experiences. They send out somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200,000 candidate surveys every year on behalf of their clients. My guest is a prolific blogger and writer, and he also just happens to be the current president of thetalentboard.org. Please welcome my guest, Kevin Grossman.
Hey,
Kevin,
Jeff.
welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much. How you doing?
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about the Talent Board, what you guys are doing there. I know you're running the Candidate Experience Awards, but just give me a quick 30 seconds before we get deep into the show here and I start pounding you with questions about this.
Sure. No, so Talent Board and the Candidate Experience Awards has been around for 9 years now, believe it or not. And every year we do benchmark research with employers big and small across industries around the world, having them self-assess their own recruitment processes and strategy and their own candidate experience. And then, of course, them targeting a population of their own candidates that then getting feedback from those candidates about their experience from pre-application to onboarding.
So you're pulling surveys not only from internal employers, but also from the candidates that went through their actual experience?
Yeah, so we actually work with the employers.
That's ballsy, man.
Well, but it's done anonymously though, right? So
Okay.
and even the companies that participate, it's anonymous for them. The part of our namesake, as you know, is the Candidate Experience Awards. So
Right.
companies who have the highest positive candidate ratings in our research every year are the ones that we celebrate and tout publicly and give them awards. But no matter what, the candidates themselves it's all confidential for the candidates and anonymous as well. But yes, we're working with the employers and we work with them to target a specific population of job types that they want to survey and get feedback from.
So are you guys producing the survey and then you say, hey, here are the survey questions so it remains consistent?
Yep.
And then you're collecting all the results so that it can remain anonymized and you don't know who the candidates are?
We have a
All
valid and reliable survey tool now and 2 sets of questions that we've been using for years. We tweak a little bit every year, but not dramatically, not to change the structure. And we've been using that for, again, 9 years now. Yes. So it is our survey. It's our survey. It's our partner platform, which is Surveil. That's who runs the surveys and captures the data that companies get access to their data from that. But it's all of our survey and research methodology, and we just walk them through it. And they glean.
Once they get I assume that they get access to not only a summary of the results that they get, but also hopefully a aggregation of all the results, right? And so they can benchmark against how well they did against others that were participated in the survey.
Yes.
What kind of information can they expect to obtain from these types of candidate experience reports?
So there's a lot of questions that we ask the candidates, but the candidates only answer as far as they got in the recruiting process. So there's logic built into the survey. As you know, most applicant/candidates, they research the company and the job that they're interested in, they apply, and then they're rejected. And only a smaller tier are going to make
it. They may not get rejected. They may be rejected internally.
And that's part of
communicated.
And that's part of what we uncover it. And I actually have an interesting tidbit about that too. But before I get there, then there's a smaller tier that make it to screening and interview, and then a much smaller tier that they get offers and those who are actually hired on. And while the companies can have hires in the population that we survey, the majority of them per our criteria have to be those that didn't get hired. because
Okay.
what we've been able to help companies understand, and we're trying to get them to understand, is that there's a greater aggregate impact on their business and their brand over time by the sheer volume of people they're saying no
We'll
to.
get to that.
Yeah. So but in regards to the aggregate data that they get, yes, they get the candid candidate feedback from their own candidates, and they get to compare themselves against the other organizations that participate, big and small, again, across industries. They can filter the data even further to be able to really slice and dice and understand how they compare against their own industry, company size, recruiting structure. The list goes on, but there are about 60 questions that we ask the candidates.
Okay.
And there's out of that, it's about 12 ratings overall that the candidates, and there's a lot of in between questions that we're asking the candidates about the journey and what they experience. But then we ask them to rate all the different points throughout that journey, mostly in the form
So
of
I
like.
assume that because you're narrowing down to, hey, it's not just a survey about your top of funnel, middle of funnel. You're doing the whole thing, right? The
It's
whole
the
candidate
whole thing.
experience, or however far they got in that
Yes.
process.
So they'll have
So
data. Yeah, they'll have
so
data across the recruiting process.
so people that participate in the survey will be able to identify the specific strengths and weaknesses within their candidate journey or candidate experience or onboarding or whatever, right?
Yeah. And that's
That
part of what, yes, and we
interesting.
help them with that. We help do an overview with them as well of their data. Now, this
Okay.
is to be clear about this. There's two kinds of surveying that goes on. There's point in time survey, and then there's continuous feedback.
Okay.
And right now, there are companies, which we're very thankful of, more and more companies that are doing continuous feedback, where they're asking at different stages throughout the year of disposition, as well as those are hiring, for their feedback, maybe 3 to 5 questions, maybe more, but and on an ongoing basis, just like we would ask our customers for feedback, right? On their
Right.
purchases. So they're doing that, and then this is a point in time survey of a group of candidates that engaged them in the past 0 to 3, 0 to 6 months, and then to basically analyze what happened during that experience in a much more granular fashion. I mean, if I could ask Jeff, the candidates and the employers themselves hundreds of questions, we would, but then we would never get a survey answered at the
Yeah,
end.
exactly. You have to make it reasonable, right?
But
And I think there's been,
we've streamlined it too to make it even more completed, a higher response rate and completion rate. So
yeah, I used to work for IBM RPO, and part of that was, the talent assessment surveys, where we had, hundreds of IO psychologists putting together
right,
these surveys. And I think statistically they found out somewhere between 40 and 80 would give you enough data to be able to make some, definitive determinations onto, and how statistically relevant it is, assuming you've got a volume of population that are willing to fill out the resume or fill out
right.
the survey, right? So I think you need it to be statistically relevant. I think it was about 1,000 with 40 questions was kind of the threshold that we always shot for.
Sure. And our own similar parameters, but it's also based on hiring volume,
Yeah,
as well as based on employer size, and we, conservatively speaking, we get about a 5 to 6% response rate, which actually isn't bad
that's really good. Yeah,
for
most
a
people
third
would
party.
expect.
Yeah, for a third party. But when employers, when they're doing their own continuous feedback, though, we're hearing they can get response rate as high as 20, 25, 30+%.
I would expect that's much more immediate, right?
It is,
So
and it is more immediate.
yeah,
Yes, this is a point in time survey. So, but that's about what we get on the average, and it's always, and there's certain minimums that they have to hit, again, based on these criteria, where we can have a statistically significant sample size for each organization that then rolls up into the aggregate for us to do our overall analysis of what we
yeah. I
see.
mean, if they're making 500 hires a year, you can't just get back 5 surveys. You probably need.
No, exactly. And
All right.
the thing is, and we're doing this, not only in North America, but in EMEA on a smaller scale, as well as Asia Pac and now Latin America for the first time.
Oh, so you guys, I didn't realize this was a global.
Yeah, we've been doing it globally for the lion's share is still North America, and
Of course.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
global multinationals that participate. So there's
Right.
also surveying, but it's really about where the companies are hiring, and that's how we focus the regional survey. So we're going to have a small data set from Latin America this year, which we're excited about, and that we'll be writing up soon.
Have you noticed that there's been vast inconsistencies with a hiring process and therefore a candidate experience when global organizations are rolling out these types of process maps, recruiting process maps across various different locations? Like, and I'll give you my experience at our IBM RPO. We did tons of international, but is there a major difference in the surveys you're getting back for the same company in different locations?
It's a great question. It's more rare than you'd think about major differences, but there are variances though, for sure, in the data. Now, I can tell you, I'll give you an example, big picture we do see, especially for global multinational companies, that the resentment rate, and when I say that, I mean, there's a question that we ask the candidates, one of many, about what kind of a relationship they want to have with the employer going forward. And if they answer like, I'm done, I don't want any other
You're flipping the bird at you, right?
That's what we call that the resentment rate. And in North America, since 2016, it's increased 40%.
Wow.
In EMEA, it's increased 25%. And in Asia Pac, it's increased only 10%. Asia Pac actually has, I mean, based on our data sets that we've collected for the past few years, and this year is holding true, it's a overall better perceived fairness and more positive ratings. But there are things that we don't track and we don't actually capture in the survey research, and they're on a granular level, and that's the cultural differences that you're going to see in not only in region but in country by country, right? So you look at the EMEA market, at least the companies that participate, if they're across countries, there totally are differences. But again, unless we were asking hundreds of questions, we wouldn't really be able to fully discern that. But that's one of the big,
a 40% resentment rate.
That increase. A
40% increase is astronomical, though, right? I mean, we're supposed to be, creating better candidate recruiting experiences through employer branding and technology and AI and video and everything else. Why? I mean, what are some of the contributing factors to having such a high increase?
I kind of, first and foremost, we're not only more vocal in North America, we're the angriest candidates on planet Earth.
Highest expectations.
That's number one. But I think some of the reasons why, though, what we see every year is competitive differentiators, communication and feedback. So what's happening, there's a good and bad of what's happening. For the longest time, there's, before I apply and when I apply, there's really little to no human interaction at all, right? Yeah. And I get the autoresponder, thank you for your application. And that may be the only thing I ever get. And
coming through the ATS or CRM.
Well, yeah, and what we find is that what's interesting is one of the questions in the survey that we ask, that we do a lot of more filtering by too now, is and this is before we even ask for even the first rating out of the gate. We ask them basically, what's the last thing you remember happening in the recruiting process? And the answers range from, I accepted an offer of employment. Obviously, that's easy. That's the people who got hired. I had an interview. I had a phone screen. I declined the offer. I withdrew. And then you get down to those who knew out of the gate that they were rejected. And then there's a big population of folks every single year. And this is across regions and company after company, big and small.
Let me guess, the black hole.
Yeah, they just remember, all they remember last happening as they applied.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to employers, I mean, companies are pushing out messages, right? I mean, there's definitely autoresponders, and some companies are trying to even get more clear about closure, like, thank you, but we're going to pass. I'm paraphrasing, but that last thing that they put down, 50 to 60% of some of the responses that we get company by company are just, I just applied.
Yeah. Never heard anything.
And those ratings, when you isolate those, they're just as, if not, they're just as negative as if I knew I was rejected. Right. And it's the same thing. It's a different, but it's fascinating that we find that. So what we're seeing now, though, is that smart technologies, AI related technologies. It's not really AI, but it's really, machine learning.
Augmented.
There's a lot of exciting chatbots when they work right. And some of the players in the space are really they have huge volumes of data that they've been training. It is getting better. We get positive responses from candidates because they're getting engagement now where they didn't have any before.
Right.
They're getting questions answered. There's companies where, whether it's Paradox, Maya, Alio, for example, where it's even further on for hourly hiring, you're getting more bot interaction all the way through even early screening as well now. And we know in our data every year, the more engagement events there are, whatever that is for the candidate, the at least initially, the higher the perceived fairness goes, and the positive ratings because of the engagement, period. Versus not hearing anything at all, which again is the black hole, which again
and it makes sense. I mean, people don't like to be ignored, right? Nothing is worse than applying to a job and either never hearing about anything, never having an opportunity to sell and tell your story, because a resume is just 1 or 2 pages, maybe 3 pages of a summary of what a person can do, right? It's certainly not a full explanation of their capabilities or abilities. So.
Right. And another trend that we're seeing is that when there's tests and assessments that are involved, when they're brought up closer to the application process and using them as a filter tool or a screening tool for the employers, there's also a bump in perceived fairness too. Oh, you're going to make me take a test. Now, again, if there's not a lot of explanation around why I'm taking this assessment and it takes a long time and I just applied, that can have a deteriorating effect.
Right.
But we do see that, again, engagement activities drive perceived fairness, even though at the point of when you do tell me you're not going to pursue me anymore, my negativity does increase again because now you're rejecting me. And that's
so a lot of this seems to be based on, how much time does the candidate have to invest to get an initial response back from a recruiter or from the company to begin with. So what do you think is like an acceptable amount of time that a candidate should have to spend filling out an application on a website, per se?
Well, this is personally, I mean, the trend, well, the less the better, to be honest. I mean,
you've got these companies that are doing one-click applies.
Well, and
very low threshold.
There's a catch-22 about that.
Too. Yeah, exactly. Which is what I was.
So you're going to increase my volume,
right? And the quality goes down.
Yeah, but that's why you also have tests and assessments now pulled up front, and you got other screening tools that you're using, and other filtering that's going on in the beginning. So you've increased your volume, but you're also, so there's a value of trying to get folks to self-select too in the front end. I mean, the serial appliers, unless you're banning them from your system, right? Which, that's a dirty little secret that does happen for those that are applying. They're never going to be qualified and they're just spamming out themselves, just like some recruiters do today with candidates.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
They're not going to ever be made the case. But the thing that we try to emphasize with what we see in the data and as it relates to communication, even on the application stages, there are going to be individuals that at some point may be what's called future fit. Now, maybe they've made it through 1 or 2 hoops, but then you're not going to pursue them any further. It's important what that experience that they have, because you do want them to come back maybe at a future date. You do want them to make referrals if they had a decent, however brief experience. We remember all of these things, right? We remember the time when we took our time applying when somebody's application process did take 45 minutes and we hit submit and then we get an automatic rejection letter. Right.
That's
something that doesn't have to happen, and it's easy to fix with systems today. But it's those little things. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about major, rocket science, unless you are in the market for a new system for whatever that is, CRM, text-based recruiting, video job descriptions, whatever. I mean, they're things that are going to help augment your recruiting process. that you're really working on the efficiencies there. But that's, again, it comes back to incremental communication feedback loops. If I make it beyond initial screening, a test assessment, and I even get a phone screen, a video screen, and maybe an interview, what happens after that stage? And are you, a big plus in our data that we see is when they get a little piece of job fit qualification feedback as to why they're not going to be pursued anymore, candidates' ratings go up.
Right.
Of course they do, because that's all we want, right? I may be bummed that I'm not going any farther, but you gave me something, and
there's some kind of validation. Yeah, I get that.
And I'm not a, and I I joke, I don't even play an employment lawyer on TV. So, but I do know that, companies have to work through those legal hurdles to make sure that they have the guidelines and guardrails and processes set up for them to be able to give feedback. That's
there's lots of ways that can go awry, but
it can, but we see it go well when companies that are doing it, that are, a lot of candy winners are doing that more and more, and they're seeing dividends because, again, perceived fairness and ratings go boom up that way. When I get feedback especially at the final stage of I'm not going to be pursued anymore, that's a big deal. But communication and feedback, whether it's always going to be a combination of automation and human interaction, but when those things are consistent from step to step, and I am aware, it's little simple things to do. What are the next steps after I apply?
Right.
You put it in an email.
How long has the Candidate Experience Awards been around?
So this is our 9 years now. We're going
9 years. So I assume you've got some repeat customers, right?
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm.
So have they been able to, and this is one of my biggest pet peeves, is companies think that, hey, we've got our recruitment process map, it's done, it's set in stone, we've got these vendors, we've got our tech stack going, and then they hands off. They think they can walk away from it, right? And that drives me absolutely bananas. When I was in the RPO, I was always pushing for, more iteration and, continual process improvement, right? So if you've got your tech stack set and the next step is to, okay, let's benchmark how well it is doing, right? Mm-hmm. If you have companies that are going through the Candidate Experience Awards year after year after year, I assume you've got some kind of, historical data that they can go back and say, okay, now you can go to your senior, executives and say, this is how we've improved over the years.
And but what's more fascinating and even disheartening. So yes, you do have that year after year benchmark data, your own feedback. You can compare and contrast. We've been getting a little bit better at helping to provide that for companies every single year. They do have that, but what we find, though, that the hard part for organizations is sustaining over time. And you already kind of highlighted it when you said they walk away from it. It's not always it could be a combination of things, right? Economic fluctuations that occur in the market. Change on the overall C-suite leadership team, change to the recruiting leadership team, change to the recruiting team.
Yeah. Hiring the technology, new software version comes out and they change the UX.
They've just been acquired. They're merging with another company. They've acquired another company. All these things impact the business of recruiting, right? And it is hard for companies to really sustain. It's a very, very small percentage of multi-year Candy Award winners who can sustain over time. And the thing that is and we find companies that knock it out of the park and then fall off the face of the earth.
So I'm sure that a lot of the data that you're providing back to your clients is anonymized, right? Yes. Is there any way for them to, get in contact with other competitors? And have a collaborative conversation. Say, look, guys, we're all in this together
with the winners,
right?
So the winners. So on our site, so every year the Candy Award winners, whatever region that they're in, the companies that have the highest positive candidate ratings, those companies are touted publicly. They're listed on our site, and absolutely can be networked with. We have a group of multi-year candy winners that we call the Candy Bar that we meet with regularly.
That's cute.
It's kind of like a think tank. I know. I wish I could take credit for it. I can't. I actually think I think it was Chris Hoyt who actually coined
All
it.
right.
He works with Jerry Crispin, who's Jerry's partner
Yeah.
now for Chris Crossroads. Anyway, the point is that they have their own peer network, and then absolutely. So the candy winners are always, most of them are always willing to be reached out to.
Yeah.
And to be asked, what is it that you're doing? Because the one thing that I can tell you, and we're trying to do this with the data, but there not only is there not one size fits all, there's so many variations that one thing that works for company X may not work for company Y, even though
definitely, yeah.
even if we see it as a best practice, right?
Right.
So that's the thing that's so fascinating about all this. But again, we do know that communication and feedback, setting expectations with candidates, being more transparent about the hiring process, just what's going to happen and when, and this is what we do, and not be afraid of your Glassdoor ratings, and as well as, and just ensuring it's not about happy candidates, it's about the perception of fairness. And again, that doesn't even mean it's not I don't mean this meaning that it's a sleight of hand scenario, but it's just more about if the candidate feels like you have been straight with me and consistent, and again, I feel like it's fair. That's all that any candidate is asking for, and that's really all that we're recommending that companies do. When you go above and beyond that, you can reap more dividends too. But it's just about if the level of perception of fairness is decent to good or above bar, especially, it's more likely that those candidates, regardless of how far they got in the process, will apply again, will refer others, and if you're a consumer-based business, buy stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's
the hope, right?
We see it every year in the data.
Yep. So we'll talk about that specific piece in
Sure.
the after hour show. I've got some, I'm going to put your feet to the fire a little bit.
Okay. Sure.
On the candidate experience, and is there an impact on the consumer experience as well? But I know that you're coming into the end of 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and you just had your Candy Experience Gala.
Yeah.
Tell me quickly about what the gala is, and I attended it, I guess 2018. It was a lot of fun.
Sure. So every year, we run small conferences and awards galas in all of the regions. The biggest one is the one in North America, and that one is where we have a day of speakers and sessions, and then the evening is when we actually hand the awards out to the companies that attend. And it's a nice formal dinner. It's a fun event, and we've been doing that every year for many years. And then it's a smaller version.
That's more like an award ceremony,
It
right?
is.
Like
That's exactly
the
what
Grammys,
it is.
the Oscars. They get recognized for, the contributions that they did. It was a really fun affair. I went to that one last year. I love that one. That was.
Oh, thank you. No. This year's was a really good event too. And then we do smaller versions of those in EMEA and APAC, and eventually in Latin America. Not probably for another year or so, because it's still so new, and we got to get some other partners down there. But right now, that's what they're for, and they really are just a celebration of, again, improving candidate experience.
So have you seen a difference in the candidate experience? I've been an old school recruiter. I'm sure you are also. Ran my own desk back in 1995. It was a desk, a phone, and a paper roll fax, heat transfer. So that's kind of how, the candidate experience then. I wish we had data from there, compare it to now. But how do you think that's evolved over the years? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse, more confusing, or?
It's gotten mixed, and I have to answer it that way because there are two. We always look at the extremes, the definitive experiences on either end. There's a lot of anytime you do survey research and you're asking for feedback and ratings, you get a lot of the squishy metal folks too.
Yeah.
That are saying like, yeah, it was kind of okay, it kind of wasn't okay, but they could go either way.
Right.
When we look at those, the definitive, like, I had a great experience, I love this brand, I will apply again, I'll do stuff with you, or I'm done. Those folks It's mixed. So we've seen the trend lines are positive for an improving candidate experience. They're smaller and it's incremental trend line going up, but we're seeing that in the data. But like I said, we're seeing a steeper trend line of resentment though. And so that's why I say it's a mixed bag. And I think that there's always a very subjective nature to getting this kind of survey data too, right? Because as a candidate, when you're asking me to give you my perception of that experience at that point in time, if it was negative at all, sometimes that can be hyper accentuated when I'm thinking about it again because I was bummed that I didn't get. So there are things that we can't.
I'm wondering if they also, they go on Glassdoor, Kununu, or whatever these reviews.
Some are doing that.
And they
by
say,
the way,
you know what? Yeah, they got a 2.7. There's a reason for that.
So every single year, and there's variance in the data, but for the most part, the over like 80-ish% of candidates tell us that they're going to share their positive experiences with their inner circle. So people that you trust, your spouses, your close peers and colleagues, your friends, people that you call and say, I had a great interview today, or I had a crappy interview today.
Yeah, I've certainly done that.
And then about 2/3 ish are going to share their negative experiences with their inner circles. They tell us this every day too. And here's the thing, and the pool of candidates changes every year that we survey. This year was 200,000 in North America alone.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's always the lion's share of our research, but every year it's different, but it's almost the same responses. Now, when we ask them, do they share this information publicly in the form of Glassdoor reviews, Indeed reviews, Fairy Godboss, Kununu, the list goes on, or just posts online, right? Social posts. Right. About 50-ish% say they share their positive experiences online, whatever that means to them. Somehow they said that they'll share them publicly. About 1/3 said they'll share their negative experiences. Now it's lower because another 30 to 40% of the candidates tell us every year, this information is private, I don't share it publicly. And most of us don't shout from the rooftops when we don't get the job.
Right.
We just don't. But there are those that still will, and they will share. They'll put it in the reviews, but it's good. They'll share both though, right? So we have to keep thinking about there's a positive aspect to this if they feel again that it was a fair process for them.
Right.
They'll share that information, and we see it in the data every year.
Kevin, thank you so much for being on the Speaker Agenda show. Absolutely. I could talk about this for hours. Don't go anywhere because we're going to go into the after hours show right now. Everybody, if you are interested in either, taking part in the survey or getting more information, I'm going to include a link below, and you can, you just fill out the link, follow the link, and you'll be able to go into it. They are coming out with a new benchmark program for 2020. I think that starts in January.
Yep,
and they've got a lot of other programs taking place, and we'll talk about those in the after hours show.
Sure.
Any last words, Kevin?
Just on January 15th, we're doing a fun social media online event called Candy Experience 2020, Candy Experience Day 2020. There we go. That you'll see more information about, where we want everybody to share their positive candidate experiences. We always talk about the bad stuff.
Yeah.
Let's share the good stuff, whether we got hired or not. So that's something that we're going to do. That's going to be a fun social media event come January 15th. So,
all right. We'll talk more about that on the after hour show. So stick around, everybody. All right. Make it a great one. Bye-bye.